Hello and welcome to Transcendental Transformation, the place where spirituality and transformation unite. Host Miss Raina imparts truth so that you can break through your limiting beliefs and evolve into a deeper consciousness. As you go about your day, remember, before every breakthrough, there is a breakdown. And now, let's start the show.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Transcendental Transformation. I'm your host, Raina, and today is Tuesday, January 31st, 2023. As always, we're coming live at the Sirius Star System studios right here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and I hope all is well with everybody. So before we get into tonight's show, I want to talk a little bit about this weekend because I had an amazing time. If you guys know that I'm from Florida and the South Florida Fair was in town, and it was just such an amazing time. This is the first time since I got ill several years ago that I was actually able to go and eat the food and ride all the rides again. And I got to be honest with you, it felt so great. It was just so, when you're, if you've ever been very ill with an illness and you've missed out on life for several years, to get back into it, it's just such an exciting feeling. And it was just such a great time. I had fun. I acted like a child. I was eating all sorts of garbage, which I normally don't, but I was just eating everything under the sun, riding all the rides, and just having a great time with my friends. So it was just so great to be out. Anyways, guys, we are live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, DLive, and now TikTok. And I want to say hi to all you TikTok people. If you guys see me looking at both cameras, it's because I have a TikTok camera and the regular radio show camera. So I'm going to try to interact with both. I don't know how this is going to work, but we're going to try it and see how it is. So anyways, let's you know what? I forgot to post up Slack, so I'm going to post that up. But anyways, guys, I hope all of you are having a wonderful evening so far. I am kind of really excited because, you know what? If you guys have been following my social media and everything, then you guys know that we had a pretty big eventful event last week or a couple weekends ago. And this is why we're titling the show Let It Die, and we're going to talk about the death of the ego, because the ego and letting it die is something that we all must evolve to. And if you don't follow my social media, then then I'm going to explain kind of what happened if you guys aren't familiar. So not last weekend, but the weekend before, we did ayahuasca, and it was me and Caleb went, and it was one of those things where I've never done ayahuasca before. I've done a lot of partying back in my life, or back when I was younger. And I know ayahuasca isn't for partying. It's more for spiritual understanding and rebirth and all sorts of stuff. And I got to be honest with you, I never had a calling towards it until all of a sudden my birthday came. I let out a lot of steam, and one of my guides, Lori, was like, "You need to do ayahuasca." And I sat there and I was thinking, ayahuasca? Why do I need to do ayahuasca? And I was like, okay, I guess. I don't really know much about it other than I know people take it and it triggers the DMT response in the brain and everything. And I guess they have some spiritual awakenings and revelations and all that stuff. But I really didn't know what was really to expect. And I got to be honest with you, it made me very, very, very nervous because I really didn't know what I was going to go through. And I had this idea, well, the one thing I kept saying about it is I don't want it to be like LSD. I don't want it to be like acid, because I used to do that when I was younger and I didn't like that. And I just didn't like losing control of my body and the reality of everything. So I went into it very nervous, and we did 2 days. We did both 2 days, and it was one of those things where I went into it fully with judgments. And if you know me as a teacher, I'm not a judgmental person, but I don't know what happened. It triggered fears and insecurities in me, things that must have been lying deep down, that was just way down in there. And I went into this and I was just totally afraid. And so the very first night, I'm going to kind of talk through this a little fast because I know we only have an hour and we got to get into the actual show and everything like that. But in order for us to understand tonight's podcast, I have to kind of explain what everything happened. So the very first night we did the ayahuasca, you do it in like 2 shots. The first shot really didn't do much for me. Like it came on for a few seconds and it died off. And I was like, well, and I kind of judged it. I was like, well, that's really nothing. That was kind of a bummer. The second one hit me like crazy. And let me tell you something. I felt like I was on a crazy train. I did not like it. I wanted to get off it. I was fighting it. And the medicine man and woman told everyone, if you fight ayahuasca, what's going to happen is it's going to make your experience worse. You have to give into it. But, I'm stubborn sometimes and I didn't listen. So it made my experience kind of very tough. And when it was over, it brought me to this idea of, well, you know what, I need to be a little more kinder to people. I've been fighting with my mom a lot. I've been fighting with Caleb. I've been kind of pushing back from people. I've been kind of resisting because something shifted a few weeks ago where I just didn't want to be around anybody. I just wanted everyone to just kind of leave me alone, back off. I didn't talk to any of my friends, anything. And it kind of brought out the reasons why I was pushing back. And so the night ended and we went back and I only got 2 hours of sleep the night before. And so I was up the rest of the day. And I knew that we were supposed to go doing it again, and I didn't want to do it. And subconsciously, I went to take a shower, and while I was in the shower, I slipped kind of and jerked my back and threw it out. And of course, my ego was sitting there saying, well, you know what? It was just like saying, well, should you really be doing this, Raina? Should you really be doing ayahuasca? Maybe this is a sign from the universe. Maybe this is a sign that your body is saying, don't do it. And my ego started talking myself out of it that I shouldn't be doing ayahuasca because, I didn't like the experience. And if I go and have that experience again, I'm not going to enjoy it. And so I did everything under the sun to talk myself out of the ayahuasca experience. But I went anyways. And so when I went there, again, I went in fear, I went in judgment, and I actually tried to cheat. When they told me to drink, this time they gave me a full dose. And when I went to do the shot, I only did part of it, and I went to act like I drank all of it. And she was like, no, drink all of it. The medicine woman watches you. Everyone watches you drink it and make sure you drink all of it because they want to make sure that you have the full experience. And I sat there and I was like, oh, okay, whatever. And as soon as I drank it, I was like, I don't like this, man. This is going to suck. I didn't want, and I had all this toxic, fearful ideas pop up in my head. And as soon as it started coming on, I started to like run away from it. Eventually it caught up to me and it just was getting harder and harder and I kept trying to run away everywhere and my ego was fighting it. It was like, I don't like this. I don't want to be a part of this ayahuasca. I don't like the way this makes me feel. I'm losing control. And my guide started asking me saying, Raina, where are you going? Where do you think you're going? And I'm running around the yard trying to run away from this experience. And they're like, and I'm like, I don't know. They're like, down now. And I was by my cold, wet mattress because it was soaked from all the humidity and everything in Florida at night. Your blankets, it felt like it felt like it rained on the blankets. And that's where I fell down. And as soon as I fell down, I just started hearing them say, you need to die. You have to die right now. And my heart rate started to go up, boom, boom. And it started to feel like I was having a heart attack. And they're like, you need to die right now. If you want to be the teacher that you want to be, and you want to do this stuff, and you have to ascend now and die. And I was like, but I have people here that I'm working with, and Caleb and my mom. I go, I can't leave them. And they're like, it doesn't matter anymore. You must die. This went on for, it seemed like probably a lot longer than it actually did. But finally, I tried to get up and I tried to get away from this. Like, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. I have too many things to do here. And they're like, just die now. Just let it all die. Let it die now. And I was like, and I said, screw it. I said something else. And I said, let's do it. And I said, you know what? Let it all die. And right then and there, my heart stopped. And I just my head fell on the bed. and I just went into consciousness, and I realized my body went away, all this energy, all this light, everything started coming, and this energy was like boom, 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 and I felt my ego just dissipate, and I felt everything that I worried about, like my attachments of who I was at the time, Miss Raina, like my worries about my mom and sister and Caleb and my students and everything. I just felt it all go away. And this was something very intense for me, and this energy was just so intense. And then they said, now we're going to show you who you are. And this information just started coming to me over and over. And I could just see everything and anything. And I was just these geometric shapes, this consciousness. And I knew in that moment that I knew Caleb, and everybody was perfectly fine. If I chose to not come back to my body, I knew that they were okay and that they didn't need me anymore. And I was I guess you would say, at peace or whatever. But I just wanted more. It was like and then they were like, you are God, you are the source, you are consciousness, and you are here to teach about love. You do not teach from love. You only teach from a place of shadows. And it was like my ego was blocking this idea that, because for so many years, all I taught was in the shadows. I taught in the feminine aspects, and that's what I've dealt with my whole entire life. It was always people's trauma and issues and challenges and all this stuff. And I never got to work in the masculine energy. So my ego got wrapped around this whole idea of being Miss Raina, the shadow worker and the teacher of femininity, and all these ideas. And when I understood who I truly was, and I realized I'm God, I am everything and anything, and I am consciousness, and so is every person on here. They are God. They are the universe or source, whatever you want to call it, whatever doesn't offend your ears. When you realize that, and truly, this power just came over me, and I just grew. And they're like, now that you realize this, let's show you. And my heart opened up, and this energy just came out, and it was like, and it just was so intense, and I felt love for everybody and everything. And I realized nothing matters. And they're like, nothing matters except love. And you will be teaching from love from here on out. And I said, I am God. I am a servant of consciousness and a servant of love. And I just kept repeating that over and over. And I said, let it all die. Let my germophobia die. Let my claustrophobia, let my anxiety, let my attachments die. Let it all die. And I could just feel it all melting away as I was accepting the truth of who I was. And then all of a sudden, if you guys follow this podcast or my work, you know I used to go by the name Miss Raina all the time. And yeah, and a lot of people think that there's a comment right now that they say there's only one God, because that's the limitation. And that's what we're going to talk about. That's what we're going to talk about. The ego is the limitations here on earth about people's thinking that there's only one source and it's external from us, that it's not us. But once you grow in consciousness and you expand your mind and you realize you are the source. But those souls that have that limitation, that think that a God or a universe is outside them, have to eventually grow and expand their consciousness until they come to understand what we're understanding now. But it was the most beautiful experience. And once I accepted that, and I realized that I need to be a servant of love, and I need to be a servant of consciousness completely, I felt the masculine and the feminine energies bond together in me and intertwine. And I felt complete. It was just a completion. Like I knew it was like I was a sphere and I was finally complete. And I got it. And I said, okay, this is where I need to be. And I kept saying, I am a servant of love. I am consciousness. I am God. I am the source. And so are they. And they are on the same path as I am. And they will realize that they are gods too. And this is all. And it just made total sense. And my ego was dead, and so was Miss Raina. And so I came out of my ayahuasca experience just realizing just everything was different. I realized that my heart started back up again when I came back, and all the noise of people throwing up and getting sick and crying came back. And when I awoken, I was covered in tears, and I know this is going to be a little gross for you guys, but I was covered in snot, and I was just, and it was all wet. My blankets were all wet, and I was shaking, and I was like, oh my God, my body temperature is coming back. And I realized, wow, I died. And what also died was my ego, the attachments that I had, and all these different things that I was holding on to. And I was only teaching for most of my life from one aspect, and that was only in the shadows, the feminine, and we call it the negative aspect. And and I have to teach for more. If I really want to be able to take what this idea is and share it with everybody, then the completion of both masculine and feminine energies have to be complete in that idea. And that is something that we must learn in order for us to grow. So let's start getting into the show then. What is our ego? Our ego is, I always say our ego is divided into two parts. And I try to make this simple for everybody. Our ego is always divided into an unhealthy ego and a healthy ego. Most people when they think of ego, they think of someone that's just, egotistical and mean and judgmental. And a lot of people live that way. But there also is a healthy side to the ego. This gives us confidence. This gives us self-awareness. This helps us love and understand and have compassion and understanding for not only ourselves, but other people. But what's sad is most of the time when we are in our ego, especially in our society, we live in the unhealthy side of our ego because it's based on selfishness. It's based on our unresolved issues in our childhood. And this all creates the chaos that we're living today. Now, we're starting brand new on TikTok, and I see so many comments, and there's a lot of love, but there's also people judging, and because their soul and their ideas aren't ready for the information yet. And so our first part of our ego is to reject. When we base something because we either got to hear it by a man, or the woman behind it has to be pretty, or they got to sound or look a certain way. This is all ego based, and we don't understand, and we can't gain knowledge. We can't evolve if we're judging people for the way they look, the way they sound, what gender they are. And this is something that has to die. And so unfortunately for most of us, many of us have these unresolved childhood issues that create this selfishness later because we have learned in our childhood, well, maybe I was picked on, maybe I wasn't smart enough. Maybe I was the heavy person. Maybe all these characteristics that we think define us. And this is something that we have to start understanding about ourselves, because the ego is born from desire. It makes us feel like we need something. We're lacking something inside of us. So I need to have these things. I need to have a car and a relationship and money, and I need to feel status. When I'm good at a sport, I'm going to make sure that everyone knows I'm good at a sport because, that makes me feel better. I'm going to live through and we live through this unhealthy, selfish desire of the ego. And we don't live in the healthy side because the healthy side will tell us that we don't need any of this. And this is something that we all have to go. And for those of you who are not on TikTok, we will be right back after these messages from I Am Evolution.
With so many fads and gimmicks in today's world, it is crucial to understand the choices we make regarding what we ingest and apply to our bodies. Phytotanic's Herbothecary herbal products help make those choices simple and smart. They use only the purest sourced ingredients to produce superior quality products that your body will love. Their specialized crystal-infused blends are formulated to establish and maintain a healthy and radiant external as well as internal domain. Relish in the full line of natural organic ready-made body and skincare, and experience Phytotanic's therapeutic-grade essential oils, or get creative and combine their high-quality raw ingredients to create your own blends. Phytotanic's custom fusion formulas are clinically developed by a licensed esthetician to suit your individual needs. We pride ourselves on the promise that your products will be formulated and tailored just for you. Visit Phytotanics.com or call 813-402-2089 for more information. Give your body the natural, healthy look it's been craving with Phytotanic's Herbothecary.
All right, everybody, we are back. And if you're just joining us, this is part 2 of the podcast, Transcendental Transformation. And we are talking about Let It Die, the death of the ego. And for those of you who are on TikTok down here, thank you so much. I appreciate you stopping by and your comments. Keep them of love and compassion. And for those of you joining on every other social media, hello. Thank you for joining us as well. So this is what we have to start to understand is where are we basing ourselves out of? Are we basing ourselves out of ego as far as selfishness and unresolved feelings? Are we afraid of things? Because when we have the ego and the ego is not in check, then we are usually coming from a place of fear. We are born from this idea of desire, and the only needs that we actually have are what? Water, food, air, and sleep. Those are the only things we actually need. After that, everything else is not necessary. It's a luxury, it's a gift, but we really don't need anything else after that. It's just because we have been conditioned by society that we have to have certain things. We have to have an education. We have to be married. We have to have children. We have to have a car, a success. We got to work 9 to 5. We got to do all these things. And if we don't have these things, well, then we haven't lived up to the ideas of who we are. And we haven't lived up to the ideas of society. And this is something that we all attach ourselves to. I used to attach myself to the idea because as growing up, we had a family business of HVAC. And that family business, my father would always sit there and say, oh, well, my daughter's going to take over the business and she's going to, take it from a multi-million to a multi-billion-dollar business. And it was always this pressure, but I didn't want to take over. But my attachment to the idea was, well, I have to please my father. And when I chose to go in the route of medicine and spirituality and consciousness, it was a big letdown. And my parents were like, what are you doing with your life? Like, what? And my ego was shattered because it was like, well, I'm not pleasing my family. I'm not pleasing my relatives. I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do. And it was this constant battle of everything that's going on. And this is something that we struggle with. So I know many of you listening to this show are probably thinking of things that you struggle with. They're thinking of things that you attach yourself to. And these are all unhealthy forms of the ego. So when we live through desire, when we live through wants, when we live through anything that's unfinished, what that tells us is that we're looking at something that we're judging ourselves that is not quite going to fit up to our own standards or somebody else's. So the ego never grows up. And this is not like in the child fun-like way where we're sitting there having a good time like I was at the fair the other day. And that's different. But when the unhealthy side of the ego, when that side grows, it throws a tantrum like a child. It kicks and it screams and this is what most of us at. How many of us have been in relationships? Think about this for a minute, where you believe that your partner should do certain things, or you throw a fit, or they throw a fit because they're not acting in the way you want them to, or the way they want you to, or anything. I see it out of even family members that I have. It's one of those things where people it's because we're not satisfied inside. And the only way we get satisfied inside is to get to know us and to come to this place of love. Our ego controls everything we're evolving ourselves into, from what we're doing to what we're believing in to what we're experiencing. Our ego is in dictation of everything we're experiencing, and it is unwilling to bend to anything. That's why so many of us are called stubborn and we fight all the time. Think about right now, some of you might even be struggling with some of the stuff I say, but think about times when people fight over religion or forms of spirituality or politics or whatever it is. We all think we're right in what we believe because depending on what we've been conditioned to and what we're willing to accept is what we're willing to adjust to. After that, our ego says, well, you know what? My way's right. I'm here and, this feels comfortable to me and this is what I'm going to believe. This is the way I'm going to believe. And after that, everything else is wrong. And we don't listen. We don't listen to women. We don't listen to men. We don't listen to what someone says unless it fits our idea of what we think it should come from. And this is the ego in full force. It's all out of control. And that's the main point to the unhealthy ego. If we are going to let the unhealthy ego die, and we're going to shed this all these attachments and everything that's causing us chaos, then we have to let that side die. And that means we have to let go of control. The control of the idea that we have control over things other than ourselves and how we're going to react to it. Think about how we can react to something. If someone comes at us in some type of way, let's say we're going out to the store and we're just having a grand old time, and then someone comes at us and starts fighting with us or just arguing with us, well, we have the control, we have the knowledge and the ability to either react to that or not to react to that. If we choose to react to that and engage, well, then we have no control over our unhealthy ego. That rules us, and that's what we're doing. We're constantly buying into that. If we come from a healthy place of the ego, well, then I understand that even if you come at me and you don't like what I'm saying and you're going to judge me for the way I look or sound or whatever, or just because you don't agree with what I'm saying, well, then I know, okay, that's fine. That's good. That's fine. If that's where you need to be in your path, eventually you will find wherever you need to be, and that's all kumbaya. But I am where I am at, and that's great. And that's the difference between fighting back and forth. Because when we believe things are true and we say this is true and there's no other way, what we're ending up doing is we're stopping ourselves from growth. The unhealthy ego stops us from growing. It tricks us into thinking that we know everything, and if society says it and it's on TV and everyone starts to believe it, well, it must be true. Then we buy in to the unselfish, or to the very selfish ego. We buy into the lack of control. We buy into all these things, and fear starts to grow. Fear starts to take hold of our lives, and we can no longer be able to move forward in that situation. So when we go to the healthy ego, we have to come from a place where we just let it go. Because you know what? We can't control when we're going to pass on. We can't control a lot of times what's going to happen in our life, but we can control how we feel about ourselves, how we treat ourselves, how we do self-care, what we eat, what we do, all these things. We have control over that. This is something that we have to be able to understand. It comes from a place of understanding and acceptance. I understand before I got ill, I was very fit, muscular. I was very thin, a little more feminine looking. And then I started getting sick, gaining weight, and I struggled with it because I started jumping into an unhealthy ego. I started saying, well, you know what? I've been thin. I'm working out. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm playing softball 4 nights a week, and then football tournaments and softball tournaments on the weekend. I should be so skinny. It's not even funny. And I started buying into this. I started getting slower, and then I'm like, oh my God, maybe I'm aging. Maybe something inside of me is I'm aging, and I'm just starting to get slower, and I didn't come from a place of accepting. And then I gained all this weight, and I started to almost get unhappy. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to buy into this, because you know what? Something is off. I know something is off because I'm not feeling well. I'm dizzy all the time. And I had to accept what was going on. And I finally, when I decided that I'm going to start searching out and figuring out what it is that the illness is, then, regardless of how much my body changes, whether people like me anymore or listen to me or whatever, then that's what's going to, and then all of a sudden I decided to accept it. I started looking at myself for who I was in this moment. I started accepting the situation that I was in that moment. And I didn't worry about tomorrow. I didn't worry about the past. I just started looking at where we're at. We got another thing, but don't we need to let go of all of the ego to die? No. So the question is on TikTok. Don't we need to let go of all of the ego to die? We need to let go of the unhealthy side of the ego, because as I said, the unhealthy side keeps us in limitation, keeps us in confusion, keeps us in fear, keeps us in these things. The healthy side says, you know what? I'm going to expand my consciousness. I'm going to expand my mind. I'm going to try to view things in a different way. I'm going to look at myself and say, hey, you know what? Right now, my body, like I did, my body was ill. It was very sick. And at the time, I was gaining weight. I wasn't feeling well. I had to learn to accept that side of me, and I had to let go of the unhealthy side of the ego. So it teaches us who we really are at that moment, because, we're not going to stay young forever. That's just the facts of life. We are not going to stay young and sexy and ageless forever. Nobody is. No matter how old, how advanced we are, nobody is going to stay that way. And so you have to be willing to adjust and adapt to life and your situations as it is. So many of us fight it. It's funny because with my students, this is something that they struggle with, and I get with all the time. That's a constant struggle with people always saying, well, things used to be good. I like the way things used to be. I want them to go back to the way they were. This is the ego. This is the unhealthy side saying, well, I'm attached to the time when I was young and youthful and I didn't have a care in the world and things were just simpler. The only reason why things have changed to more complicated is because you've chosen to make those things more complicated. You choose on a daily basis to make things complicated. You try to change the things that cannot be changed, and you try to fight the things that are changing. So, look, I'm in my 40s now. I'm 45 now. I'm not 23 years old. I'm not going to try to be 23 years old. I've accepted where I'm at in my life. And one day soon, because after this ayahuasca healing, man, after this, I even said during the healing, I was like, I'm healed. The EBV is done. And I just felt it go. And since then, ask everybody. I'm going on roller coasters, walking around the park. I haven't got dizzy. I mean, I'm not going to go out, and just go crazy with it because my body still has to heal. But I'm in a brand new body and I feel it. I was actually talking to one of my students about that because she was like, well, doesn't it feel weird to feel like you're brand new? I was like, absolutely. I was like, because the death of that ego, when I just let it all die and I said, you know what, I don't need Miss Raina anymore. I don't need that idea. I don't need everything I was attached to. What ended up happening was it was reborn into something different. And that idea was just trying to experience everything and anything. And so that idea caught me, and it was just something that was just there. So this is something that we have to start understanding with ourselves. Our healthy ego allows us to build. Remember, if you're not building within, it's because you're fighting or resisting something. If you're not building the confidence and the strength you want to see, it's because you are attached to your old ways. You're not trying to work on the things you're constantly going in right away. As soon as something goes in, you're constantly going on the need to attach yourself to a person or a thing or a place or an idea. It's a constant grab without even trying to evolve at all. And I know that a lot of people struggle with this because, they'll say, oh, I'm going to try. And then right away, boom, they're right back into their habits because it doesn't bring about the awareness. And this is that structure system. You have to realize that everything that you are is an illusion. And that's something you have to let die. You have to let the idea die that this body and this thing is who you are. That all these things that I have, cameras, computers, screens, everything, the studio, everything that we have, is not me at all. Anything that I own is not me. Everything that we have to let die. Because once we want to become aware of something, the only thing that we need to become aware of is who we are. And we can't do that if we're constantly attached to people and ideas and places and things. When I was traveling all over the country, and I was trying to find out who I was when I was younger, and I was trying to find out my place to live and my place in life. I was sitting there, to be honest with you, and I was attaching myself, I should move here because it's a spiritual town and more people will be like me, and Lori would always laugh at me, and she'd be like, she's like, you're a guide. She's like, will you wake up and remember who you are? Because I was buying into the attachments. I was losing the ability to allow myself to grow and allow myself to see things other than it is. And the message that I always got was, open up to your love, open up to be able to share love with one another, open up to be able to do these things so that we're able to grow, that you're able to build on the personality and the ideas that you want to be. And it was the same message as it was 20 years ago that it was when I died with the ayahuasca situation. It was the same message. If you want to be the idea of this teacher and you're supposed to be this idea, then you have to come from this place of love. You have to allow the ability of love to be able to grow inside of you and share with others, regardless of what other people do with you. Because that was one of the things that made me push people away all the time, was, is the attacks. People constantly came after me. Even right now on TikToks, there's a couple of people that made some comments, and that's cool. We got to send them love. We got to be able to send them and make them under, and because they're not going to understand. And you know what? These teachings aren't for them. They're not for these teachings are for the people that want it. And the people that want it are at a point in their evolution that they're willing to put themselves through whatever to kill their ego, to kill them, the identities that they are attached to, and have the ability to walk away from relationships and friendships that are toxic, and jobs and places and living quarters and everything, and just let it all die, burn it down to the ground. Because this is something that the ego wants. The ego wants the justification. The ego wants the judgment. The ego has to have things a specific way. If not, then what we do is we automatically judge someone right away. We're like, well, this person isn't pretty, or this person isn't this, and this place isn't this way, and it feels weird, and we start to judge because our ego is tricking ourselves into believing something's happening that's not really happening. And this is why so many people falter under the idea of the ego. So when we're looking at it, I always say, well, if something is coming from a need, like if you feel like you need something, then we're an ego. If you feel like you're judging someone, like if you're like, well, I'm a spiritual person and that, but then you can only listen to a specific type of person, or you only listen to somebody for a few seconds, and you're like, I disagree with that one thing, and then you shut down. Well, this is the ego rejecting the self of self-growth. This is saying, well, you know what? I only want something that's going to kind of take me to a little bit of place where I want to go. But after that, I don't want it anymore because I really don't want to grow. And because I really don't want to grow, I'm just going to make up all these excuses and blame other people and blame things and say, well, you know what? I don't agree with that. And that person, I'm only going to look at attractive people on YouTube, and I'm only going to listen to this person and that. And we give ourselves a million excuses of why we don't want something and why we don't want to grow. Fear is the number one component to everything, and this is something that I said earlier that we have to be able to do. So actually we're going to take a break because I want to start this next section. I don't want to get into it. I already see it's time for a break. So anyways, everybody, we'll be right back from these messages from our sponsor.
With so many fads and gimmicks in today's world, it is crucial to understand the choices we make regarding what we ingest and apply to our bodies. Phytotanic's Herbothecary herbal products help make those choices simple and smart. They use only the purest sourced ingredients to produce superior quality products that your body will love. Their specialized crystal-infused blends are formulated to establish and maintain a healthy and radiant external as well as internal domain. Relish in the full line of natural organic ready-made body and skincare, and experience Phytotanic's therapeutic-grade essential oils, or get creative and combine their high-quality raw ingredients to create your own blends. Phytotanic's custom fusion formulas are clinically developed by a licensed esthetician to suit your individual needs. We pride ourselves on the promise that your products will be formulated and tailored just for you. Visit Phytotanics.com or call 813-402-2089 for more information. Give your body the natural, healthy look it's been craving with Phytotanic's Herbothecary.
All right, everybody, we are back for the third part. If you're just joining us, we are talking about how we let the ego die. So one of the questions that we have is, how do many of us in a world live in a world where there's ego? If we're evolving from this idea of ego, how do we live in it? Well, first of all, we have to recognize that 99.9% of us are unconscious. And there's only a very small percentage of people that are actually conscious. Very, very tiny. And usually these people that are conscious are here to help other people awaken. And this is why we never judge, because usually unconscious people judge. So we have to have, as we're growing, as we're evolving, as we're learning about ourselves, we have to grow and understand that everybody is in the position that they need to be in, because that's where their soul is. And so, like I was saying earlier about the TikToks, like we did a video yesterday, we're doing, and of course you always get people that are mean and nasty. And that's just the way life's going to be. They're unconscious and they're involved in ego, and so they're going to judge and hate because they don't know anything, or I shouldn't say that, they don't know any better. And so that idea, then, as someone who's growing in consciousness, we have to understand that. It's almost like I always say, like with children, you don't sit there and like if someone's 4 years old and they have this wild imagination, they're like, oh my God, Santa Claus or whatever, the Easter Bunny, and I'm going to go and I'm this commander now, and they start going with this, this imagination. You don't sit there and down them and sit there and say, what's wrong with you, child? Because they're 4 years old. They don't have the conscious understanding of life yet. And that's the same thing. It doesn't matter if they're 60, 70, 80, 40 years old. It depends on their evolution and where they're at. The younger the soul, the more egotism, the more unconscious, the more unaware they are. And that's the same with us. We have to recognize that we are all unconscious in some part. We are all in ego. We would not be here. If you're here to learn, and then you would recognize that everybody has the ego. Everybody has these things. We're aware in some, and that's the tricky part, is figuring out, okay, well, I'm here. I have incarnated into this world of reality. So if I'm incarnated into this world, that means I'm here to learn something. So what is it that I can't see? What is it that I don't want to see? And what is it that I'm trying to see that I haven't evolved there too? And so this is where compassion and understanding come into with other people. We have to realize that, hey, there's a lot of people that are unconscious. There's a lot of people that are unaware. There's a lot of people that are going to be hateful and judgmental, but that doesn't mean that you have to be a part of it. It doesn't mean that you have to dive into everything else and dive into the fear, dive into the fighting, dive into this. As you grow in consciousness and as your soul evolves, you're going to want to understand, well, you know what? They're struggling just like I did. At one time, whether it's this lifetime or a different lifetime, I used to be there. I used to struggle with that. So, let's have compassion for those people that are still struggling with this. And this is how you start to live in a world that is constantly in egotism and fighting and a toxic vibration or a low stagnant vibration that's moving. Because when we understand, I was talking with this with one of my students as well earlier today, and she's like, well, I get the fact that we're all one. We hear this idea that we're all one, but I really don't understand how we help each other heal. I was like, well, you have to understand that if you really do understand. And I took out my arm and I said, see all these hairs, even though they're peach fuzz, I go, none of these hairs are separate from my body. All of these hairs are part of my body. Now, there might be 1 million hairs on my body, but they're all they all have a purpose. And the purpose is to gather information to my brain, which is my consciousness. My brain, my soul, it's consciousness, and it's gathering, whether I'm touching something or hearing something, it's gathering information to my consciousness. And so all these souls, everybody out here, all of you are all part of this one collective consciousness that is gathering information information for itself and understanding itself. And it's not, that's why when I was saying earlier that you are God, you are the universe, you are the source, there is no, and when I realized that, and that's why when the person commented, well, there's only one God, and you're, and that the understanding has to come from, well, if you truly understand that you're all one, then you will have compassion for not only yourself, but other people, because you will realize that all these different perspectives, all these different realities are happening and gathering information for one collective consciousness. And this helps us resolve our ego, because when we're looking at ourselves, we can't take things personally anymore. We can't say, well, the universe is doing this to me. Karma did this to me. Because karma, the way we look at karma and understand karma here in the United States is just not true. It just isn't. But when we start looking at ourselves in a different perspective and start realizing that I'm here to gather consciousness or information for my own consciousness, and the way I learn by that is through my experience, and the way I experience is to resolve the ego at hand, then it all dissipates, and we don't want to fight with each other. That's why no matter what people say on any of the YouTube channels, TikTok, whatever, hey, they can be as mean as they want to me. That's okay. I still will send them love. I will still send them that. And because I know they're at a point where they're fighting love. They're fighting acceptance. They're fighting who they are because they don't have the awareness and the understanding of who they are. So they fight it. And this is why we struggle. So when we see this earth and we see the world, and so many people are not understanding that we're going through a thing called the jump right now. And when we don't understand this, and all we see is people fighting more and arguing and bickering and that we choose to buy into that because we realize that we are an ego. We realize that we're unconscious. And the soul says, okay, well, I need to go towards this because that's what gives me life. I have to fight with people because I need that. I need somebody to yell at me so I can feel righteous. I can feel strong. I can tell them, well, they're stupid. They're idiots. They're that. And it's just like a hurricane swirling of chaos that you're building. And this is why we have to let the ego die. This is why when we look at the world, if we don't have compassion for the rest of the world, what we're really saying to ourselves is, I don't understand myself and I don't have compassion for myself. What I believe is what somebody told me. I haven't learned much because I've bought into everything in the world. Every single thing in the world that has been told to me, I've accepted as truth. Did I learn anything? Did I try to understand? No, I just accepted it. And because I've accepted it and my ego accepted it, that means that, boom, I'm off to the races, and anyone who thinks differently than me, that means that I'm going to fight with you because I'm right and you're wrong. And if you don't do the way I do, that means you're a bad person and I'm the good person because I have morals and I have all these judgments. And this is all the crazy ego. This is all the ego playing games with us. And it's like a ping pong match, back and forth, boom. And you're just playing back and forth with your ego. Imagine the chaos. Imagine what your life would be like if you just let it die. If you just said, you know what, whatever your name is, I'm going to let it die. I'm tired of, I don't need to attach myself to this idea anymore. I am going to let it die. I'm just going to kill the ego. I'm going to kill the attachment to who I am, what I'm attached to, and anybody and anything that isn't going in my path where I need to go. And it's releasing. After I died at the ayahuasca, when I was reborn, I felt not only different, but I felt reborn. I felt like I could see and hear things clearer and different. And still to this, I know it's only been almost 2 weeks, but it's still I see people differently. Before I used to see only the chaos in them. I only saw their issues and their challenges because working in the feminine aspect, the shadows, the negative aspect, that's all I ever saw. But now working in the masculine energy as well, being complete without the ego, resolve the ego. Now I can see the love in them. I can see the potential in them. I can see the challenges they're struggling with, but I can also see that there's something inside them, the spark, and the spark is us. The spark is who we are. That is the idea of the human experience. So many of us want to walk away from this third dimension, this 3D world. We're always trying to fight it. And I hear so many people, oh, let's escape the matrix. Let's get out of it. We got to get out of it. We got to escape. No, we don't. The whole point is we are the matrix. We are the third dimension. We're the fourth, fifth, sixth, first, ninth dimension. We are every dimension, and everything is happening all at once. And right now we're through the dimensions. But the only thing that creates this third world is the idea that this is solid, this is a reality. And we put ourselves here so that this is our playground. This is how we experience who we are in ourselves, in our entirety. And it's meant to be chaotic so that we can learn to grow and we can dissolve this ego to return back to who we are. And this is the only way we're going to channel to understand who we are. So if you're struggling with these ideas, if you're struggling with anything, you have to let it die. And I know I sound like a broken record through this whole podcast. Right? We've been going on this for 50 minutes now, but we really, it was so important for me to accept that I had to let Miss Raina die. I had to let the germophobia die. I had to let the claustrophobia, the anxiety, the panic attacks. I had to let go of the idea that I was there to help certain people and that things were going to fall. I had to let it all die. And the moment I did, it was just like this release. And it was just so powerful and beautiful. And I don't fear ayahuasca anymore. I don't fear anything. Like tomorrow, if I physically died and went back home, I would be okay with it, because I know that, one, I put a lot of information out there and whoever wants to hear it hears it. But you know what? I know that they're good, because eventually that information keeps coming out over and over and over. So whether it's me as a teacher or someone else as a teacher or anything like that, since every being in this collective consciousness is one, and we are all one, the information is going to reappear. So if tomorrow, if all my computers crashed and burned to the ground, and all the podcasts I've ever done, and all my blogs and everything burned to the ground, and I died tomorrow, I know that the information would come back out sometime through somebody else, because the information is here. The information is already here. The only thing that's stopping you from getting that information is love. That is it. If you don't come from a place of love, you can't access the Akashic records. You can't access the information. There's nothing that makes me or anybody else any more special than you, because I am you, you are me. And the only thing that separates us is this ego that thinks that we're separate. And so when we come from this place of love and we're really ready to let the ego die and let everything die, the materialism, the jobs, the popularity, the way people look, the genders, the races, when you let everything die, the only thing that matters is love. And that's the greatest gift that we have. All right, everybody, I think I am going to stop there. I think we're going to stop there for tonight. So TikTokers, thank you if you lasted this long through the podcast. We do a podcast every second Tuesday, or every 2 Tuesdays. We do it twice a month at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Thank you guys so much for being here. And for the rest of you on all the other social medias, thank you guys so much for being here. I had a wonderful time. As always, I love you guys. I can't stress how much I appreciate you guys being here and being a part of, the idea of I am and raising global consciousness to help us evolve. And as always, if you want to follow us on our Facebook at facebook.com/Transcendental Transformation. Excuse me, I have to swallow. Our YouTube is the same. Visit my website, soulandspiritguide.com, and sign up for the newsletter and get VIP access to hidden shows. And when we have special guests, we're going to have special guest offers sometimes. Those are always pleasant. If you really enjoyed tonight's show, please share it with somebody. Tell a friend. The only way we're going to help raise consciousness of this planet is by you guys, because you are all a part of this just as much. So thank you if you guys shared. And always remember to believe in yourself, and it's not our abilities or talents that make us who we are, but it is our choices. Thank you, and have a wonderful evening.